Decision 2020. The votes are in, and now it's nearly time to see the first results. 36 people want to be governor of Washington State.
The state can't just keep taxing the citizens. We're taxed way too much right now.
We have had millions of dollars stolen from our government, and no one gets fired.
And they are the party of lower taxes, more limited government. I mean, that fits my value system a heck of a lot more than the Democratic Party.
Will Jay Inslee advance, and who will he face in November? All eyes are on the 8th Congressional District from the east side to Ellensburg, considered a battleground race.
It's a challenge running in a COVID-19 world. That said, we are seeing incredible response.
Over the past year and a half, people have noticed that I've had 52 town halls.
Democrat Kim Schreier seeking a second term in a seat once held by a popular Republican. And a look ahead to the biggest race of the general election, the President Trump-Joe Biden matchup, and how the political battle could affect races here at home. This is a King 5 special presentation. Here's your host, Chris Daniels.
And good evening from election headquarters here at King 5 News in Seattle. The ballot drop boxes are now closed, and we are minutes away from seeing the first returns in this 2020 Washington State primary. Thank you for joining us. I'm Chris Daniels. There are several key races that we are following this evening. The race for governor is the marquee event. 36 candidates filed, including Governor Jay Inslee, who is seeking a third term. Question tonight, did Tim Eyman resonate with Republicans? And what about the rest of the field? We are about to find out. Other state offices, including Lieutenant Governor Cyrus Habib, is stepping down, leaving the door wide open for that position. Secretary of State Kim Eyman is one of the few Republicans holding a major state office. She hopes to advance to the general election tonight. All 10 congressional districts are on the ballot across the state. 9 incumbents are seeking re-election, with Representative Denny Heck, the sole congressman, eyeing a new future. The 8th district on the east side is getting some attention as well tonight as Republicans target a seat held by the freshman representative, Kim Schreier, who will be the new Pierce County Sheriff. Paul Pastor led the department for some 20 years, and 4 candidates want his job tonight. And voters will narrow the field in dozens of state legislative races, deciding who's in and who's out for the general election. And that is the key point tonight. Remember, the top 2 primary is exactly that. Voters will decide the top 2 candidates that will advance to the general election November 3rd. For the candidates, it's all about surviving this round and moving on. For the voters, it's about seeing democracy in action and political framework for the local, state, and federal races. We'll break in with results as soon as those numbers arrive, again, any minute. But right now, let's bring in our King 5 News political analyst. Scott McClellan served as White House press secretary under President George W. Bush and is currently the vice president of student affairs at Seattle University. Ron Sims served as King County executive and also as the deputy secretary of the Housing and Urban Development Department during the Obama administration. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
It's great to be here.
Let's first begin with the governor's race. Those numbers we're expecting any minute now. Jay Inslee running for a third term, one of the 36 candidates on the ballot. Scott, let's begin with you. What are you looking for with the governor's race tonight, the big one?
Well, I want to see if there is a Republican candidate that kind of stands out from the rest of the crowd. With 4 kind of four competitive Republicans in the race running against each other, low name ID for each of them overall, who is going to stand out and be the challenger to Governor Inslee. But you're going up against a governor who right now has pretty popular numbers coming into his re-election, going for a third term, the first governor since Governor Evans to try to get that third term. And if Inslee finishes above 50%, how far above 50% does he finish tonight? That again is another mark that I'm looking at. That would show pretty strong moving into his chance for a third term. And so those are some of the things I'm looking at, because the Trump impact in this race, the Trump factor, if you will, is stronger at the top of the ticket than anywhere else. And right now we know from our King 5 Survey USA poll last week that Donald Trump's disapproval ratings far exceed his approval ratings in the state of Washington, probably more so than most other states, Democratic states that is, in terms of that disapproval, a 44% gap. And so, we'll see if a Republican emerges. Is it close between those 3 or 4 Republican candidates that are more competitive than the rest? Or is there one Republican that emerges with a significant bit of a lead compared to the rest that might give them a little bit of momentum heading into a very uphill battle to try to unseat Governor Inslee?
Ron, one of the things we saw in the exclusive King 5 statewide poll of voters is that of these Republican candidates, it may only take 10 to 15% to advance to the general election. What are you looking for tonight?
I think that in the governor's race, I think that you're going to see a really significant percentage of people moving over to the Governor Inslee for a number of reasons. One, he's acquitted himself well in a crisis, which is this pandemic that we're in, and he's done it, and he's been informing people, and he's exerted leadership, and that's really, really important. It's the old Governor Dan Evans strategy. Take charge, run the state, and do it incredibly well. And I think Governor Inslee is very emblematic of that. So I don't know which Republican is going to get the numbers to be number 2, but I would not want to be a Republican in a race against Governor Jay Inslee.
And Ron, as you're talking, the first numbers have come in from King County. What the folks at home are seeing on their screen right now, again, King County numbers, and Jay Inslee has 70% of the vote, 70.4% of the vote on this primary night. Joshua Freed, the former Bothell mayor, at 6.5% with a little over 23,000 votes. Tim Eyman, below 5% at 4.8%. I think it's well documented he is not popular in King County amongst especially elected officials and the political parties. And then Lauren Culp, who is the police chief in small Republic, Washington, a town of just 1,100 people. He has 4.7% of the vote, a significant margin in just King County. Again, King County numbers only. Ron, what's your first take as you hear Jay Inslee getting a very strong majority of the vote tonight?
I am not surprised by the majority. I am stunned by the how significant it was. I mean, those numbers I have never heard of before anybody doing that. I mean, those were stunning numbers. But I never felt that Governor Inslee was in trouble. I thought it was going to be a tidal wave, and we're seeing that tidal wave. He has done so many things very well in a crisis. And that's how you're measured when you are in an executive position. And he's done it calmly and persuasively, and he's done it in a way that makes sense to people. So I join the thousands of others that voted for him, because you don't see this kind of stunning work done by elected officials. It's easier to hide, it's easier to blame. He put it all on his shoulders and said, I will sink or swim with this, with the most difficult challenge that a generation's been affected by, and he has acquitted himself marvelously.
Scott, what do you think the state's most populous county going very heavily towards Inslee tonight?
Yeah, it's a little surprising with how high that number is. It's not surprising that he has that significant of a margin. And I think the other surprising aspect of this is just how low those Republican candidates are polling. There has not been a standout Republican candidate to emerge in this race, one that could really challenge Governor Inslee, who is popular at this point, and running in a presidential election year when the president is not in a strong position, in fact is in the state of Washington, very strong disapproval, and then people feel that the country is moving in the wrong direction by large margins. And they look at Governor Inslee and they say, well, by and large, we think he's done a pretty good job of managing this pandemic, of managing us through this crisis, of taking a phased approach. And so he's getting very high marks, and I think he's getting some crossover, not just from swing voters, but crossover from Republicans by those numbers, and certainly in King County. And I think the more moderate Republicans are saying they're okay with him to some extent.
Well, it's going to be interesting as more numbers come in to see what happens with the Republicans that are trying to face off against Jay Inslee in the fall. Let's turn to my colleague Drew Mickelson, who is down in Olympia covering the governor's race tonight. And I understand he already has reaction from Tim Eyman. Drew.
Yes, Chris, as you know, Tim Eyman has done this before, declaring victory before even seeing the results. He may want to change that statement after looking at these at least initial results that we are getting out of King County, which have him in third place with less than 5% of the votes. The candidate, Tim Eyman, at about 7:45 started this victory speech, and he said that this is a victory. Anytime we can try to get a Democrat out of office in the state of Washington, that's a victory. And he said that Democrats have had a strong hold on the governor's mansion for 35 years. He compared getting them out of the mansion to putting a man on the moon, and ended up quoting John F. Kennedy.
We choose to do these things because they are, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept and one which we intend to win. And that, for me, is ending 35 years of rule by the Democrats of the governor's mansion.
Eyman said he has, quote, done everything I could to get Jay Inslee out of office, and he hopes to be on that ballot come November. Chris, back to you.
Drew, thank you. And one of the things that's interesting about this primary election night is because of the mandates in place, there aren't a lot of parties. A lot of the candidates are choosing to stay home. The parties, both Republican and Democrat, they're not doing any big gala. There is one party, though, that we know of, and that is over in Leavenworth. Candidate Lauren Culp has invited people to a bit of a festival with live music, and my colleague Kayla Lafferty is there live. Kayla.
And it really, truly does feel like a festival. I'll step right out of the way so you can see what's going on. We've got live music, a lot of people here. We talked to several people that actually drove some great distances to be here to show their support for Lauren Culp, but also to kind of protest some of the mandates from Governor Inslee. And Plain, actually near Leavenworth, where this rally is still in a modified phase 1 of the governor's phased approach to reopening the state, meaning no gatherings larger than 5 people and face coverings are supposed to be required. And some of the people we talked to came all the way from Spokane and even Clarkston, Washington, to be here for this rally, not only to show support for Culp, but also in protest of those COVID-19 restrictions.
We feel, as future Governor Culp does, that the people can make the decisions for our own lives, not a governor sitting in a mansion somewhere. So we have the right. So it's about our freedoms, not about what Inslee's agenda is.
His mandates, first and foremost, are not legal. He has no legal authority. He's admitted to the courts. He knows these aren't laws. He can make all the recommendations he wants, but nobody mandates, nobody tells me I absolutely have to, except that man up there.
And now we are told that Culp is not quite here yet, but he is on his way, and we are expected to talk to him in the next hour or so. So we'll make sure to keep you updated on that. Live in Plain, Kayla Lafferty, King 5 News.
Kayla, we'll keep an eye on that. Thank you. Let's talk about some of the other numbers in the other races. Lieutenant Governor, there are a lot of people watching this tonight, as well as Denny Heck retired from Congress in the 10th Congressional District, and then about a month later decided, with the retirement of Cyrus Habib, who left that post to become a priest, that he would then run for Lieutenant Governor. And you see the first numbers that we have in right now has Heck up by just a few percentage points. Marco Lias, who's another Democrat, again, the top two could go through to November regardless of party. He is right now sitting at 29%. And Davison Sattler of Seattle, who was a Democrat, switched over to the Republican Party. She is once ran for Seattle City Council. She's right now sitting in at third. And then with the Secretary of State's race, again, these are the first numbers, and I believe these are numbers from King County, so we have to put this into that proper perspective. I'm told Snohomish County is also part of this number that you see on the screen. Secretary of State Kim Eyman right now is down, and down big. to Gail Tarleton, who is a Seattle politician, a state representative, a former Port of Seattle commissioner. Kim Eyman, the incumbent, she's been elected twice, back in 2012, 2016. She is one of the highest ranking Republicans to hold state office on the West Coast. And right now, with these initial numbers, she is down by 22 points to Gail Tarleton. That is a number that we have talked about in advance, Ron Sims and Scott McClellan, about the so-called Trump effect and the impact of his disapproval ratings here in Washington State. Scott, you were talking about this off the top. What does that Secretary of State's race, as it stands right now, mean to you?
Well, it's early in the night, right? And it's early in the election returns, which we'll still see coming in over the next few days. But it's not a great sign. It just shows the kind of challenge that she's going to face come November with Trump at the top of the ticket. And she's got to continue to run her race on her terms with her message and her record. That is Kim Eyman, the incumbent Secretary of State, the lone Republican statewide office holder, if she is going to get reelected to that third term. I'd be interested to see how those numbers compare in those same areas to 4 years ago and see how she is running compared to that. I suspect it's a wider margin in those areas that have come in already from where it was 4 years ago. And I think that is a direct reflection of the Trump factor. But it's also a reflection that she's running against Representative Tarleton from Seattle. And so these early numbers might be reflective of coming in from areas where we know she's going to be stronger, but stronger because that's where she holds office.
Yeah, that's about a 78,000 vote gap right now. And again, the top two advanced to November. To answer your question, Scott, back in 2012, Kim Eyman had a narrow victory in that race. It was a narrow again in 2016 in the primary, and then she defeated Tina Podlodowski by about 7 or 8 points in the general. So this is already shaping up to be a different race. Ron Sims, what do you think?
Well, I agree. What we're looking at, though, and we should understand it, we're looking at the impact of the President of the United States on the Republican Party. So it's really difficult, even with good Republican candidates, for them to shake the dust off or whatever else you want to, the rocks or the baggage that they're going to be perceived to be carrying because of the president. And I think that as we begin to look throughout the rest of this evening at numbers, I think we're going to find that the Trump impact in the state is very significant and will be a setback to many of the Republican candidates, irrespective of their qualifications. It's going to hurt them.
Yeah, and I think it's also going to be interesting as Seattle politicians that are thinking about running for another office in the future as these numbers continue to come out over the next few days, what they think about their future plans. I mean, this is obviously a strong showing for a Seattle politician tonight. Let's look at the 8th district, which is the east side of King and Pierce counties, the Plateaus, Sammamish, Issaquah, also central Washington. And you see Kim Schreier, she had a slugfest 2 years ago with Dino Rossi to win her first term. She's running for re-election, and right now Kim Schreier has 52.6% of the vote in the 8th Congressional District. Jesse Jensen, who is a newcomer, the only real candidate that raised any money outside of Schreier, he's at 16%, and that is just a narrow margin over another Republican, Keith Swank, and the numbers just changed again. 45.6% for Kim Schreier and 17.6% for Jesse Jensen, 17.2% for Keith Swank, who has not spent much money in that district. So as far as the Republican who will go against Kim Schreier in the fall, that looks like it is a toss-up right now. That's one of the stories, as well as that's a tremendous gap between the incumbent Democrat and any Republican that is running a far different race. It seems like shaping up compared to just a couple of years ago. My colleague Britt Moore is in the 8th district. Britt, what do you have?
Yeah, Chris, we know 2 years ago this district turned blue for the first time since it was created. So tonight we're watching to see if we get any indication come November if this district will stay blue or will be flipped red. Looking at those results that you just broke down, the incumbent Democrat Kim Schreier leading with 53% of the vote, so far. Republican Jesse Jensen pulling in that 16%. And then interesting, Republican Keith Swank close behind Jensen with 14%. Now, we know the 8th district seat could help gauge the political climate here in Washington. The incumbent Kim Schreier faces 7 challengers tonight. We know the Republican candidate Jesse Jensen raised the most money out of all of the challengers, and he's endorsed by Dave Reichert, who previously represented this district. Obviously a very diverse district. We know it covers parts of King, Pierce, Chelan, Kittitas County. So we will wait tonight to see just who those top 2 candidates are and who will be moving forward in the November election. Chris?
Britt, thank you. Yes, it's going to be interesting on multiple levels with those numbers in the 8th district. Thank you. Let's look at the 10th district now. This is the seat that was vacated by Denny Heck, who is now running for lieutenant governor. There have been several different candidates in this race, the only open seat of the Washington Congressional delegation. And you see the initial numbers as they come in from south of Tacoma. This includes communities like Lakewood, Olympia, Puyallup. The former Tacoma mayor, Marilyn Strickland, is in the lead right now with 21.4% of the vote. Beth Dolio at 14.4%. She has run more as a progressive, had kind of the Bernie Sanders side of the party backing her. And then Representative Christine Reeves, state representative from Federal Way, 13.2% against the top 2 candidates move on to the November general election, and it looks like it is anybody's game at this point. Ron, what do you think on both the 8th and the 10th districts?
Well, I think that Marilyn Strickland is going to be one of the candidates. She's former mayor of Tacoma, Seattle Chamber of Commerce president, enjoys a great reputation. So I think that she will be in the lead, and she'll be one of the 2 candidates. When it comes to the other districts that are in play, I think what we're beginning to see, we were talking about earlier about the east side of King County, and what I was looking and saying, wow, you know, that is full of techies. And if you look at the average age and family size, you're beginning to realize you find people who are doing technology work for a lot of firms. They're homeowners, and they have kids, which it tends to be a very good district for Democrats. So we're going to have a Democratic night. I think the numbers will continue to look good for us. The demographics in the state are looking very good for us, and the political tides at this time are looking very good for us.
Scott, again on the 8th district, it looks like a couple of stories developing. Kim Schreier looking to be in pretty good shape. The Republican challenger doesn't look like we're going to know who that might be tonight, but there appears to be a pretty significant gap between Schreier and the Republicans. What do you make of the 8th and the 10th?
Yeah, a very significant gap. I think Schreier looks like she's in a very strong position. I think that race has been tagged as a likely Democrat hold all along. And certainly there's nothing that we're seeing tonight that would change that dynamic, even though it might have the possibility for a Republican theoretically to win it if they're competitive and have enough, they're well funded. And certainly Jesse Jensen has the backing of former Congressman Dave Reichert, and that's a strong endorsement. But he's got a long way to go, as we're seeing tonight, to really even build name ID and be known, much less get his message out and then contrast why he should be the congressman over Congresswoman Schreier, who has been in office for the last 2 years and has gained some respect within that district for what she has done over those 2 years. And she's a strong candidate to begin with, well funded at that. Then I'm looking, when I look at the 10th and hear the numbers coming in from Lieutenant Governor's race too, I find both of those interesting. Are you going to have 2 Democrats as the top 2 finishers in both of those races? There's a lot of votes still to come in. But the early returns say that that's a possibility, a very real possibility from what I'm hearing.
Let's peek in as well on Pierce County in the sheriff's race. There will be a new sheriff in town, so to speak, in Pierce County with the retirement of Paul Pastor, and the longtime public information officer, Ed Troyer, appears to have the strongest support tonight with 53%. He has the best name recognition of anybody running for Pierce County Sheriff, and it looks like he will advance on to the general election in November to replace his boss, Paul Pastor, who's retiring after 20 years in Pierce County. We've been talking a lot through the course of this half hour, however, about the Trump effect. There is a storyline here that's going to develop about enthusiasm for some of these races. I know, Ron and Scott, that you are veterans of campaigns that involve fundraising, and people look at these numbers tonight and they're going to think, hey, is my candidate potentially a viable candidate for the fall, whether they advance or not? And if there is a big gap between their opponent, for instance, the Secretary of State's race as it stands right now, will somebody want to open up their wallet to support their candidate? So how do numbers like this on a primary night factor into fundraising for the sprint, the 3 months before the general election, Scott?
Well, for the Republican candidates, it makes it very difficult. They have not, in these races we've been talking about, no Republican has shown the ability to raise the kind of money to really be truly competitive and overtake their Democratic opponent or the Democratic incumbent. And tonight, they're showing they still have a very long way to go. So why would those traditional Republican donors want to open up their pocketbooks and fund those campaigns if they don't think they have a real shot of winning? And so how do you try to persuade them, hey, I have a chance of winning? Well, tonight makes it that much more difficult when they already look at the numbers and they look at the top of the ticket, and you know, how does the Republican Party in the state of Washington become more relevant? They're really not relevant at this point, except in 3 congressional districts and a statewide Republican office, and then some legislative races or legislative offices around the state. But on a whole, on the statewide level, they're really not competitive at this point, and there's not credible candidates running for the top offices that you would normally expect to be running at this time.
Well, Ron, I want you to answer the question as well, but I also want to tell you that we had some other numbers come in on both the governor's race and the Secretary of State's race, and it appears there's been some slight changes with the new vote totals coming in here in the last few minutes. The Eyman-Tarleton race, the Secretary of State's race, that first initial number dump, so to speak, showed Gail Tarleton with a huge advantage, but it's now flipped. Kim Eyman in the lead by 5 points. And also with the governor's race, and we are showing once again the Secretary of State numbers there. Kim Eyman, the incumbent Republican, one of the highest ranking Republicans to hold statewide office on the West Coast, she now is at 50% with over 600,000 votes. Gail Tarleton at 543,000, 45%. So those additional votes that came in have shifted the pendulum, so to speak. And then as we go back to the governor's race, and this is important now, Jay Inslee is at 52%. Lauren Culp, who is the police chief for a town of 1,100 people, Republic, Washington, is at 17% with 205,000 votes. The closest candidates, Joshua Freed and Tim Eyman, both at 7%. Lauren Culp has opened up about 115,000 vote advantage on his potential challengers here. So it could be Inslee Culp. I wanted to get all that in for you, Ron Sims, as we have 1 more minute here to go on this show. Ron, what do you think about those numbers?
Well, I'm surprised at what happened in the governor's race in regards to a candidate who was little known and didn't have a lot of money doing so well, but he's going to be up against a very formidable candidate with an incredible amount of energy and money behind him. And so I think it's going to be difficult to overcome Governor Inslee. The Secretary of State's office and Lieutenant Governor's offices are always interesting to watch because they have their own subtleties to them, but I'm not surprised. We'll see changes back and forth all night in those races.
Well, Ron Sims, Scott McClellan, our King 5 News political analyst, great as usual. Thanks for weighing in tonight on what is going to be an interesting night to talk about over the next few days, because it does look like we have a storyline developing in the governor's race, in the Secretary of State's race, and a few of these congressional districts as well. Once again, Jay Inslee leading in the initial returns, Lauren Culp second. If that holds, they both will advance to November. In the Secretary of State's race, Kim Eyman is up a few points on Gail Tarleton. That's going to be a race to watch as well. We'll talk more about it coming up live tonight at 9 o'clock on King at 11. See you then.